We are recording live on the drive home from Championship Wrestling from Hollywood's. What was today's taping?
It was just a regular taping.
Just a regular taping with the PP3 qualifying matches?
The start of the tournament.
Start of the tournament. This is J. Cal, and along with me is Big Dog Daryl. Daryl, what's going on, brother?
Just chilling.
I put on the radio voice because, we're on the radio, kind of. This is a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com, your number one source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance. You can follow us at the Alliance blog, and that's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Did I say that already? Twitch, TikTok, YouTube, and Daryl, if someone wants to follow you, how can they follow you, man?
Well, do they still use Tout?
No, I think. Do you still have your Vine going?
Well, not the one they could contact me on, but if this is my wife, hon, I'll give you the Vine when I get home.
Oh. So, a historic night at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. We saw, for me, a lot of new names. Daryl, there were a lot of guys that I'd never even seen before.
Yeah, I've kept up with the TV, thanks to Fight and the fact that, well, like I say, I have the time at work to where I'm able to watch the show. But yeah, there were new faces tonight and some returns, like Mikey O'Shea. I missed that dude.
Yeah, Mikey O'Shea, number one. The last time I saw him in a Championship Wrestling from Hollywood ring was over 5 years ago when he was feuding with Scrap Iron, Adam Pearce.
And they had the cage match, and I think Mikey won that, but Pearce pretty much knocked him out of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood after that.
I think he melted his face with a fireball.
Or wrapped it with a steel chair, I'm not sure.
I think there was a fireball involved. All right, well, more after this. All right, here we go. And now we're back from the break. So we were at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and like we said, the return of Mikey O'Shea, the Irish juggernaut. And although he was not successful in tonight's efforts, it was great to see him back in the ring. We saw the remnants, the leftovers. I'm not sure what they call them in Hollywood, but Ray Rosas and Uptown Andy Brown both advancing in the PP3 Cup tournament. Saw I know it's not the debut, but the Wolf Zandies, they've been teaming all over Southern California. Is it Wolf Daddies or Wolf Zandies?
Well, we were calling them the Wolf Daddies, so I'm not sure.
Okay, I think it's Zandies, but it could be Wolf Daddies. Either way, great tag team. What did you think of? I mean, they had two matches tonight. What did you think of it?
Well, they looked real good out there. I mean, the thing is that with Bad Dude Tito, he pretty much did everything he could possibly do as a singles. So, he went away for a while. And Che, originally the Rancheros, didn't work out. So then he was the singles, Rogelio. And, you can only go so far with that. So it's almost seemed like, almost like fresh faces. Almost. It's a thing Jim Cornette says, they can't miss you until you go away.
I believe
type
that.
deal, and that's how I felt like with, seeing Tito for the first time in a while.
Yeah. And he hasn't missed a beat either. This still looks really good. And, Che looks great, man. I remember Trey. No, not Trey. I remember Che when he was wrestling as Head. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember when he first came out. Yeah, when he first came out. Yeah.
And, that dude has had a transformation, not only in appearance, but style of wrestling. He went from almost like a junior heavyweight style wrestler to legitimate heavyweight. And I don't know, I thought both those guys looked really good tonight, and I'd like to see what the future holds for them. I mean, 2 big wins here in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Maybe that sets them in line for a United Wrestling Network tag team title, which there was no Ryan Taylor tonight.
Yeah, that was disappointing. That's the one, I admit it, I don't go out of my way, to brag about the guy and, but when I get a moment or whatever, I make it clear, like with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, Ryan Taylor's my guy. Ryan Taylor has that unique grappling style that you don't see much from other people, which makes him stand out. And, even when, I don't know if it was the NWA that tweeted, like, okay, what faces you want to see or something like that. Somebody tweeted it, and I said, Ryan Taylor.
Yes. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because we did have a couple of NWA regulars here tonight. They're also Hollywood regulars. Ryan Taylor, to me, is a guy that I don't know why. It feels like the entire world is sleeping on how talented he is. Not only is he a great technician, the dude's got a great body, great look. I don't know why he isn't wrestling everywhere. In the same vein of somebody that was like a Rocky Romero or a Scorpio Sky, I think Ryan Taylor's one of these guys. Is like, why isn't he signed yet? What, MLW, NWA, AEW, WWF, WWE, NXT, New Japan, how can he not be wrestling with a contract right now?
The only thing I can think of with that is that he is so humble that he doesn't, really put himself out there. Like, I know there was a couple times some people tweeted about, like, how good he was, and he, instead of, like, him going with it and being like, thank you, I appreciate it, or whatever, he went out of his way to say, no, these people are better than me.
Yeah.
I still got quite a ways to go. He kind of downplayed himself to put others over, which, is...
That's right.
It's a nice thing to do, but at the same time, you kind of, lowered your brand saying, no, look at these people before me.
Yeah.
So, that's the only thing, that I think Ryan did to not get himself noticed as much is that he doesn't feel like he's at that level. Even though people like me, I'm like, well, I think you are at that level.
Yeah. For me, being a long-time championship wrestler from a Hollywood guy, there's like 4 guys here currently who I'm going to go out of my way to watch them wherever they go. Ryan Taylor's right up there on that list. Johnny Goodtime is another guy that's on that list. Chris Bay, for me, I really enjoy Chris Bay. And, of course, Royce Isaacs, who we did see tonight. Royce didn't have such a good night. I don't want to give out any spoilers, but let's just say suitcase is a little bit lighter going on the way home tonight. But it looks like he had a good time in the parking lot, so we'll move right along.
Yeah, he didn't kayfabe the parking lot.
Cash money. I hope you didn't get a parking ticket like I did. Thanks a lot, Port Hueneme. Fucktards. Sorry, that's inappropriate.
Do we want to do a GoFundMe for the parking ticket? Anybody chip in what was it, $53?
$53.
Chip in like 50 cents. You send them an Alliance pin.
Yeah, if you Venmo me $53, I'll send you a T-shirt. It might be slightly worn, but I'll send you a T-shirt. So you brought up a great question off air, and because I am an NWA themed website, podcast, whatever, let's go ahead and address what you were talking about, and that is the National Wrestling Alliance. Now, the question you proposed to me before we started was, did the NWA is the NWA reborn, or have they always been here? And we should have probably discussed this a little bit more off the air, but what are your thoughts on the NWA?
Okay, well, the reason I brought this up to you is because you are since I've known you, a lifetime National Wrestling Alliance supporter. Okay, you are the type of guy, in football terms, you're the guy that's going to be in the arena when when the team ain't selling tickets. You're going to be the one guy with the season pass in the arena.
That's fair. That's a fair...
Me, I am more of a casual wrestling viewer, where if you weren't on TV and I didn't have access to you, I don't know you exist. I was like that pretty much growing up until I was aware through a friend of mine of the Championship Wrestling from Hollywood reboot or relaunch, where it was going to be on KDOC, not the original showcase.
Wait, just for clarification, Santa Ana, not Glendale. That's your initial, or excuse me, not the studio, CBS Studios.
No, not the CBS Studios.
Okay.
The original Santa Ana Theater,
Galaxy Theater.
Okay, then it was what was the one in Hollywood?
So the progression, the first NWA TV tapings out here were the NWA Pro Wrestling TV tapings, and those were kind of a mishmash of just like arena shows and other wrestling events. And they did some tapings in San Bernardino, and then they did an NWA Championship Wrestling from Hollywood pilot. And there's a massage parlor. You should have stopped. A Championship Wrestling from Hollywood pilot that was shot at the Columbia Square Studios, and they did about they did a couple episodes there, and then they did an NWA showcase show there, and then they took like a 3-year hiatus, maybe even longer, and then we got the NWA Championship Wrestling from Hollywood in Santa Ana at the Galaxy Theater. They went from the Galaxy Theater out to Glendale.
No, then they actually went to Hollywood.
They were actually in Hollywood.
At that theater, which I thought was the Galaxy Theater.
No, that was the Regent Showcase Theater.
Okay.
And then they went to
Glendale Studio.
Well, first it was the Glendale Satellite Studio, then the Glendale Studio. Then they lost their home, and they were taping just like at different various venues.
I remember that one casino.
There was the Bicycle Casino in City of Commerce, and then they were at this building in Anaheim, like a rec building, and then
that was the first red carpet rumble.
Yeah, which friend of the show Kevin Douglas was on. I just had to say that. I think I'm contractually obligated to mention Kevin Douglas whenever.
This is Spartan. Yeah. I remember you, Kev.
And then we went to out here in Port Hueneme, where they've been for like the last 6 years, I think, at the Oceanview Pavillion. And of course, by the time they got out here to Oceanview, the Oceanview Pavillion, Port Hueneme, they were no longer affiliated with the National Wrestling Alliance.
Yeah, so now that we got that clarification, I went ahead and, like I said, the only known existence of the NWA for me. Well, let me give you my background, where I grew up watching WWF. I watched Superstars and Wrestling Challenge every Saturday at noon on KTTV Fox 11 out here in LA.
Yeah.
And I didn't have access to cable until maybe like 1991, and I just happened to find WCW by accident, flipping through channels one day, and because I was a kid, I didn't understand the difference between Eastern Standard Time and, Pacific Time, so when they say 6:05, and I tune in at 6:05, some movie is on, or some baseball game.
Damn Braves.
So it never clicked with me. I never got to start watching WCW on a regular basis until maybe like 1992, because the time thing never caught on. I just happened I just happened to be flipping channels, and then that's where it is. And I remember specifically it was a clip of the Bash right after Luger Flair left, where it was showing Luger beating Wyndham with Harley Race throwing the chair in.
Oh yeah. Good
so
stuff. That was a good time.
So and then after that, I got exposure to the technically still WCW, but they were still going by the NWA through tapes at my local Blockbuster.
Nice.
Where I saw, I remember from there it was the Great American Bash 89, Halloween Havoc 89, Starrcade 89, which basically made me a fan of NWA 1989.
Yeah.
Wild Thing 90. So, and then later on, I went back even further and saw like the Great American Bash 87 tour with the first 2 War Games matches.
There you go.
That 2-hour tape. So I knew a little bit of it, but I still associated it with WCW.
Right.
And I even watched in 92 where they brought back the NWA World Heavyweight title. They brought... Now, a little footnote here was at the time, I started reading the After Mags.
Sure.
So that's when I was somewhat exposed. Like, I knew who Ric Flair was.
Woo.
Even though I never saw a Ric Flair match. I knew who Ric Flair was. And when Bobby Heenan showed up on WWF television with that title, I knew what that title was from the Aftermags that I saw. But let's be honest, I was a kid. I mostly looked at the pictures. I didn't really read the articles.
Were you looking for Missy Hyatt photos?
Missy wasn't that hot to me.
What?
That's another story.
That's another story.
Yeah, Missy wasn't that hot to me.
All right.
But anyways, even in 92, when they brought back the NWA, I was just confused because I always knew it was WCW. That's what I always associated with. So now it's like the NWA, and now they have 2 world titles, and now they have... It's the same tag title, but now they have just 2 different belts. It was just very confusing for me as a kid.
Sure.
Until, I just happened to notice one day that, okay, they still have 2 titles, but they're not calling it NWA anymore. It's now WCW International, or they just stopped calling it the Unified titles or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. Until I got older, had access to the internet, and actually brushed up on some of this history, which made me finally understand, oh, okay, this is what this is. And then the brief time I saw it in the WWF, that little NWA...
The invasion.
And, that... I can't even call that an invasion. That was an angle.
1998.
Yes, it was.
Because the last
this time, you actually got the year right this time.
I did some research.
Yeah. And... Don't worry, folks. I'm not rambling on. I'm getting to a point. But again, this is me as a casual viewer, where I see this and I'm like, okay, and then it went away. That didn't last long, and I knew nothing about the NWA until I see, a couple years later, TNA pops up with that NWA TNA.
Yes, sir.
For a bit, and I'm like, okay.
World's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock, first TNA NWA World Champion.
Yeah, until, whatever happened with, with them. There's 2 sides to every story, but I think Dixie's lying. And that went away, and it's now like just strictly TNA. And so it wasn't until I started attending the NWA tapings with by Dave Marquez, the championship wrestler from Hollywood that we know now, that it would eventually evolve into what we know now. The fact is that And also through WWE at that time had that 24/7 channel. This was pre-network.
Yeah.
That 24/7 channel where they would have like these roundtable discussions, you know, with discussing things, including like NWA history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you would hear about it in the WWE DVDs, since they pretty much own the footage and everything now.
Right.
And so that gets me to my point. With the knowledge that I have, again, as a casual viewer, especially now with the reboot or whatever you want to call it under Billy Corgan, people have kept saying the NWA is back. The NWA is back.
Right.
But then you get the people that have had some affiliation with it for so long say, oh, we never went away. We just started celebrating, like, you know, we just celebrated our 70th year.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've heard you say in the past, like, okay, well, you know, WCW was gone. ECW was gone. Promotions are gone left and right. The NWA never went away. I think to make that statement is kind of apples and oranges. Because the thing is that the NWA was never one promotion. The NWA was never one thing.
Yes.
The NWA was always a governing body. The NWA was always a license. Dating all the way back, you know, to the beginning of wrestling time. That's what it always was. In the 1980s, you know, Starrcade, that, even though that was under the NWA banner, that was really Jim Crockett Promotions.
Right.
It wasn't the quote-unquote NWA. And, you know, even to modify this in TNA, that was TNA. That was Total Nonstop Action. That was not the quote-unquote NWA.
Correct.
Even with Dave, it wasn't... That was Dave Marquez running his own thing.
Right.
Not necessarily the NWA. So, WCW, despite all the Turner crap, it was one promotion.
Right.
ECW was one promotion. The NWA was never a singular promotion until now. The NWA always had an affiliation with somebody else. And my 2 cents is that it was always somebody else that used the NWA history and its lineage of back then, when it was the dominant figure before the World Wrestling Federation did their global expansion. People always go back to that lineage when they need help establishing their new thing, because they can automatically link themselves to that history.
Right.
WWF did it when they wanted to, in my opinion, and others have said it, when they want to go ahead and kind of try to discredit WCW. But WCW always saying, oh, our title dates back to 1905, and WCW still tried to use the NWA heritage.
Yeah.
And here comes WWF with the real NWA, quote unquote.
Yep.
Saying, like, nope, this is the heritage, not what you guys are spitting.
Right.
Your title was only started up less than 10 years ago.
Right. Right.
TNA did that, where they wanted to automatically link all their heritage and link all their, you know, so therefore it makes sense for them to have legends on it. It would make sense for, you know what I mean, to add instant credibility.
Absolutely.
During the dark days, which even commentators and talent themselves have called of New Japan, linked up using the NWA and having their title defended. Even, hell, this is Wrestle Kingdom weekend.
Yep.
And the NWA title was defended at Wrestle Kingdom in the past.
Yeah.
But that was the pre-blow-up with the Ring of Honor Association and Bullet Club and everything like that.
Right.
And
I would say that even predated the Bullet Club, like, North American expansion. Like, yes, in New Japan.
I would definitely say that. I was trying to, tiptoe around it because the Bullet Club was popular in Japan, but it wasn't until AJ Styles joined the group, fresh off his TNA run, and Ring of Honor started booking these guys at the same time, that the global expansion, kaboomed, so to speak. But the NWA was short time, but pre that.
Yes.
With them.
And you could even make the case that that was the second time that the NWA World Title became a fixture in New Japan, because the time shortly after WCW withdrew from the NWA, that's where the NWA title went. Masahiro Chono, the G1 tournament that WCW,
Rick Rude, and the whole Rick Rude thing. Which again, I watched this in '92 when I was a kid, and I'm not understanding it because they didn't fully explain it or tiptoe around. They're trying to tiptoe around it, so to speak. Where it was, now I know as an adult and watching New Japan, okay, that was the G1 tournament, and WCW is like, oh, that's the NWA World Title tournament, and it's like, okay, it's a World Title tournament, but I don't know who the hell is in it. And then Masa Chono shows up, and I'm like, who is this?
Bunch of Japanese dudes you never heard of.
Yeah, outside of Muda from watching the old tapes.
And I think Hiroshi Sasaki, I think that's the guy. I can't remember. My brain is not what it used to be. I remember he had worked some WCW shows.
It was the like they would occasionally bring them in. Like they had like that one Starrcade that had the tag tournament.
Yes.
The Great American Bash had the NWA tag title tournament. And of course, I mean, hell, he just he retired this weekend, but Jushin Liger back in '91 with Pillman.
Yep. Barn burner.
Yeah, but that's my case, is that okay? And also to further back this up, it's like, okay, why is it every promo I have ever heard in regards to the NWA Championship, when people start going to their heritage, they go from the 80s and back. I never hear champions from the 90s, the 2000s, or this past decade that just ended, the 2010s, mentioned in these promos. The only 2010 champion I hear acknowledged outside of Nick Aldis himself is Colt Cabana, but that's just because Colt Cabana just happened to be wrestling on the NWA show now. So they refer to it. But past that, at any promo from the champions, when they have this major spotlight on them, from Cody to Mr. Aldis himself, don't hear these names that were around post Flair.
I do want to say, I think, I could be mistaken, I think I remember Aldis acknowledging AJ Styles as an NWA World Champion. I think he acknowledged Sting as an NWA World Champion. And, but you're right. No, I mean, you bring up a great point. The 90s, 2000s, 2010s mostly are abstinent from that list of former NWA World Champions. And if I could just jump in on this point, I think the reason why is because Ric Flair, Rick Steamboat, Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes are larger than life. They carry a legacy that cannot be matched today. You just can't do it. Not even the WWE World's Heavyweight Champion can carry the same cachet that Ric Flair and the 10 pounds of gold had, going up and down the Mid-Atlantic, flying out from Georgia, flying to North Carolina, flying to New Jersey, wrestling in Chicago. It just doesn't carry the same cachet. I think that's why you don't hear it mentioned in the same breath. Although Adam Pearce, who by my definition was probably the measuring stick of what a world heavyweight champion should be for not just the NWA but any wrestling promotion. You got to remember, Pearce didn't have the backing of a huge office to make his title defenses. He had to go out there and work for those matches, where AJ Styles relied on Jeff Jarrett and the Impact to get him matches in Korea or to get his matches weekly on pay-per-view. That was Adam Pearce's hustle. You know what I mean? So they don't mention Adam Pearce, but they should. They don't mention Blue Demon Jr., but they should. And I think it's a big misconception thinking that, modern wrestling fans today, they don't really know who Adam Pearce is, or who Rob Conway was, or who, Mike Rapata, and a perfectly good name would be somebody like Sabu, but no one wants to talk about Sabu, or no one wants to bring up Christian Cage or Rhino. But all of these guys added some sort of legitimacy. Hashimoto, Dan the Beast Severn. Why wouldn't you mention these guys? But they just didn't carry the same cachet that Ric Flair had. Go ahead.
I get that, but it still goes back to my point where it's like, okay, so it's that old phrase where if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's around, does it make a sound? And you can say, yeah, but I'm like, how do you know? Nobody's there to hear it.
Right.
That's how the NWA pretty much has been for the past close to 3 decades, outside of those small periods where they were they were associated with another national company like TNA or WCW, or again the brief 3 or 4 months, whatever it was, with the WWF.
Sure.
Outside of that, they were pretty much non-existent on a national level for people like myself who, hey, I have to go out of my way heavily to follow. So that's my whole debate with the NWA never really went away, and the NWA is back. I think, honestly, if you're a hardcore fan, yeah, it never technically went away. But for the average viewer, now that they've actually put themselves in a position to be noticed on their own, instead of it being, it's just TNA with NWA belts, then yeah, it's the NWA is back. I think credibility lends itself to both statements depending on who you're at, but it's not just one or it's not just the other. And people, that are quick to correct, like, oh, we never went away. It's like, well, then where the hell have you been?
And I think, and here's where it's going to get a little confusing. You're right, because you're comparing apples to oranges. And this is where, I'm sorry, but I might eviscerate this whole argument. This weekend, New Japan had the biggest show in its company, right? Right? Biggest show, Wrestle Kingdom. It's the biggest show of the year. I do think they do like 2 or 3 shows this whole weekend.
This is the first time they've done 2 separate nights.
Okay. This is the biggest wrestling event in Japan. It's the second biggest wrestling event maybe in the world, right? Just because I don't watch, New Japan on Access, not that that's a thing anymore, but because I didn't watch it doesn't mean it didn't happen, right? To the point you said, if a tree falls in the woods and I'm not there to hear it to make a sound. Well, no. But you didn't have to be there to hear it. Other people were there. The NWA has, since 1948, is that right? 48, yeah. Has been the largest wrestling sanctioning body. And that has never changed. That has not changed since 1948 to now. And you want to know why I know this? Because the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship was defended in China on a Championship Wrestling from Hollywood TV show. That the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship was defended in a House of Hardcore show in Australia. Because the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship was defended in freaking CZW, New Jersey. The NWA World title has always been a traveling championship. That's why we say, you were right when you said that the NWA has always been backed up with a license or a member or some sort of associate or affiliate. Correct, and that's still happening today. Hell, just a few weeks ago, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship was defended in Minnesota at the Modus Brewery in conjunction with Ken Anderson's wrestling school out there. And it's going to be defended in Manitoba, Canada, I think next month, as part of this big casino show. Although Billy Corgan has propped up an NWA wrestling promotion, it is still a sanctioning title that is a traveling championship. That's why it could be defended in the WWE, and it wouldn't break any commitments. That's why it was able to be defended at All In, or Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, or Ring of Honor, or MLW. I mean, who's to say that can't happen? Who's to say right now, Nick Aldis, who's to say he couldn't show up in New Japan, or All Japan, or Pro Wrestling Noah, or any number of wrestling promotions in the UK? There's nothing preventing that, because outside of not wanting to work with Impact, the NWA is open for business, baby. That belt, that champion, they can go anywhere they want to, including the WWE. And I joke around about it on Twitter, and I say it all the time. I 100% would pay to see Triple H versus Nick Aldis for the 10 pounds of gold at an NXT takeover. It doesn't have to be at WrestleMania. It doesn't have to be at the Royal Rumble. Hell, it could be in the NXT UK takeover. The NWA has always been a sanctioning body. Period. And whether it was, the Mid-South or Jim Crockett Promotions or, World class. Hell, people often think when WCW withdrew from the NWA, the NWA was nothing. No. In 94, there was an NWA in Dallas that was by the Crockett family. It was by Jim Crockett Promotions. It just didn't go by that name. It was NWA Dallas. There was, in Portland, Don Owens was promoting the NWA out there with Scotty the Body, also known as Raven. The NWA was out in New Jersey with, God help me, Dennis Coralluzzo. It went back in Florida with Howard Brody, and it was being defended in Japan with New Japan Pro Wrestling, like we mentioned earlier. And that title never ceased to exist. So when WCW withdrew, and then they had the tournament, and Shane Douglas won they went from the gold belt, the big gold belt, back to the 10 pounds of gold, and then Douglas threw it on the ground. Yes, the title was vacant, but there was another tournament, a tournament that Chris Candido won, and then a tournament that, shortly after that, losing that belt to Dan Severn, who wrestled in Japan with that title in some of the deathmatch promotions, wrestled that, would bring that title to his UFC fights, would eventually find his way in the WWE, but also had defended that title for Dennis Coralluzzo while working the WWE. That title, again, Dan Severn is a perfect example of that. When he was working for the WWE, he was still making dates as NWA World Champion, wrestling in New Jersey, wrestling in the Southwest, and even wrestling in Japan. So that title, you're right, the NWA has always been backed up by a promotion. It's never been on its own the way it kind of seems it is today. But again, if you go through the years, WCW, New Japan, ECW, look at Corluzzo's promotions. Then it got picked up by 01, Hashimoto. And then from 01 went to Impact, TNA. And then from TNA, that's when you got the first real split in the NWA where a promotion was actually big enough to kind of carry the load. And that's when you got Marquez. And he was running arenas with that title. And then, Bruce Tharp took over. And although at that point the title kind of diminished where it was at, where it was featured, but then he got the belt back in freaking New Japan again. So, to your point, yeah, absolutely. The NWA as a wrestling promotion, as a promotion, is, yes, this is it. This is their genesis. It started with 10 pounds of gold, and now we've got NWA Power and pay-per-views. But the NWA as a sanctioning body, no, never went away. You just can't argue it. Because if it went away, then that means the title would have been dormant. And there would have been no champion defending it. But even as bad as it was with Mike Rapata, wrestling in Tennessee with that title against Sabu, or Steve Corino in wrestling in ECCW in Canada, the belt was alive. The belt was being defended. The belt was moving. And I mean, the NWA is the cockroach of professional wrestling. It just won't die. You can't kill it. It has that a lot in common with Impact. It just won't die. So, to your point, yeah, you're right, man. As a wrestling promotion, this is the first time they've had this as a sanctioning body, which I still would argue they are. They since 1948, the National Wrestling Alliance has been the largest sanctioning body in professional wrestling, and it continues to be so today.
Well, I don't fully agree with that, in that, as far as quote-unquote sanctioning body, maybe it's just the terminology, but I'll say they have working relationships to have that title defended, but when you say, like, governing body, that makes me go back to, like, how that basically any promotion with the amount of money that it had could buy the license and call themselves the NWA. No disrespect to, like, John Ian, but let's be honest, was NWA Mach 1 really gonna make a big impact in the wrestling business? No, it was an NWA sanction for his local territory.
Right.
Just like other places were, like, just a local indie.
Right.
That had that NWA license, and you mentioned, like, okay, it went from here to here to here to here to here, but at the same time, it's like, okay, outside of the diehards like yourself, who and the diehards of that, local promotion, or a promotion like CZW, which, again, no offense, that they've fallen heavily from their highest, their high days back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, outside of, like, that small audience, that small group of people, who the hell's going to notice? And who the hell's going to know about it? Not, it's like, okay, nobody, it's easier these days with the internet and Twitter, things can get out like the insta second.
Right.
So it's easier that way. But again, diehards,
sure,
go for Twitter. Sure. Diehards follow on Facebook. To the casual audience, which is where I come from, I didn't know any of these things existed, or any of these things happened, because they weren't at a stage where, it was relevant enough for me to know. Unlike how Nick Aldis defending the championship at All In was made to be relevant, made to be a big deal. The NWA's association with Ring of Honor at a time where Ring of Honor, they've had a rough year, but before 2019, when they were at their hottest streak, that, made it relevant or made it important. And everywhere else that you mentioned, it wasn't at their hottest times, or at a time where attention was made to be put on and focused on. So, like you mentioned the Chris Candido winning the tournament, or the Sabu title reigns and stuff. These guys have gone down, as wrestling legends for one case or another.
Right.
But when you look at, like, you tell somebody, tell me about the career of Sabu. What's that NWA Championship title reign is not going to be listed at the top of the list.
No, you're right.
His other accomplishments
Sure.
are going to be listed as that.
Sure.
With Chris Candido, I'll say for, heavily underrated talent, for one reason or another. We won't get into it.
Sure.
Chris Candido, I consider him a legend.
Okay.
In the wrestling business. He went further than he should have, with the gimmicks that were placed on him, the associations, good or bad, that he had that, unfortunately kept overshadowing his career, his drug problems and everything. But he still overcame that and had the best career possible, had some great memorable matches, and still talked about in a positive light to this day by people that really, know him, or wrestling fans that have watched him.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, the guy got Barry Horowitz over, for Christ's sake.
Yes, he did.
But NWA World Champion, it's one of those things where you got to look up on Wikipedia to know about it.
So, okay, and I hear the point that you're making. You're coming from this angle as a casual wrestling fan. Now, I'm going to argue the only casual wrestling fan is the WWE wrestling fan, because that is the most readily available programming. They're on YouTube, they're on Facebook. I don't even watch the program, and I know the majority of the storylines, and they dominate TV ratings. Raw, SmackDown, are going to be all elite wrestling. It just is. Tell me what channel Ring of Honor comes on.
Depends on where you're at.
Tell me what...
They're on syndication.
Sure. Through Sinclair Broadcasting, their parent company. But tell me what channel they come on. You almost can't. And honestly, the easiest way to watch it is what? Fight TV, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Until recently, tell me what channel Impact came on. The easiest way to watch Impact Wrestling until recently was just throwing on Twitch, social media, getting on the Gamer channel to watch Impact Wrestling. But we're both going to give that a pass and say that's still available for casual wrestling. Okay? But if that technology wasn't there 10 years ago, would we be talking about it? Ring of Honor lost their HDNet deal about 15 years ago. Their market was tape trading. You can't tell me casual fans know about that. And when we talk about Samoa Joe and his success, do we talk about his Ring of Honor world title? Absolutely. Why? Because it's still here. It's still there. He helped make Ring of Honor what Ring of Honor is. And regardless of what he did in Impact, most people even think of him more as a Ring of Honor world champion than an Impact world champion. And again, the point I made earlier, this weekend was the second biggest wrestling promotion in the world. Not in the United States, in the world, which means it rivals, it's bigger than All Elite Wrestling. It's bigger than AAA. It's bigger than CMLL. The only promotion that's bigger is the WWE. And they don't have TV in the United States. You have to have their network to watch it. So, as a casual fan, I didn't see it. I didn't watch the pay-per-view. So...
But to my point, you knew about it.
Sure. But we also live in a different time and age, too. Like you said it yourself. The internet is more of a thing today than it was 10 years ago. And that, you want to know how I knew about Dan Severn's world title or Hashimoto's world title? You're right. It wasn't made available to me on video. There wasn't a YouTube. I had to go look for it. I was watching the websites. I was reading message boards. So, again, I knew about it, but I'm also the diehard. But the same thing with Ring of Honor. How did most of the fans initially get into Ring of Honor? Tape trading. Tape trading. That doesn't exist anymore because we have a YouTube. But tape trading is what powered the indie wrestlings in the early 2000s. There wouldn't be a Ring of Honor if there wasn't an all-pro wrestling out here in Northern California. In fact, really, it was all-pro wrestling in ECWA, East Coast Wrestling Alliance, that would kind of pave the road for Ring of Honor. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about Christopher Daniels, Mike Modest, Donovan Morgan up in APW. We don't talk about Low Key and Homicide and all those guys that kind of built ECWA. But again, those were byproducts of not casual wrestling, but the hard to find stuff. Doesn't mean it didn't exist. And to a point, we talk about the NWA. Well, there was local NWA television. There, before David Marquez, there were other promoters promoting pro wrestling. I still can't buy the fact that because the casual fan didn't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Because I just gave you a couple different options that casual wrestling fans don't know what Ring of Honor is.
Well, my whole thing was I'm not trying to discredit or say, because I made that point at the end.
Sure.
Was that, okay, you can see it from both views. It's not one and it's not the other. But you can see from both views that when people say the NWA is back, you can understand where they're coming from. But also, when people say in response, oh, well, it never went away, it's like, okay, I can see technically where you're coming from, but this is also, I'm one of those people that says the NWA is back. And this is why I say that. People can say, technically, they can say the same thing about Impact if they want to.
Sure.
Because did Impact ever really go away? No. But they got down so bad, from losing from Spike TV to Destination America. It took me a second to try to remember the channel.
Sure.
I only remember it because of that logo.
Sure.
To Pop TV, to even this last channel that they were on that was pretty pathetic, especially since it was owned by Sinclair, and that's the best channel that they could have got.
Was that Pursuit? Wasn't that the channel?
Yeah, I think it was Pursuit. But it was just like to now they bump back up to Access. Mm-hmm. So people, if and Impact's playing off that saying hard to kill.
Yeah.
It technically you could say okay, fine, and that's the reaction it's been. Impact's back.
Yeah.
Okay, Impact never really went away, but you can understand why they're saying that because you dropped out of sight.
Sure.
You dropped out of, and when I say casual fan, I'm not meaning just WWE, TV audience.
Sure.
I mean just the regular, like me and you, we've discussed this before, right. Where, hey, we have priorities in life.
Sure.
That we're not other people who can just sit at home and watch wrestling all day.
Right.
And keep up with everything everywhere.
Right.
And watch every single wrestling show. Just the ones that, when I say casual, I mean the people that it's available to them with the time that, like average Joes, working 9 to 5 on top of, other priorities and commitments daily, their lifestyle. And if they want to watch wrestling, okay, they have access to it on television, or in these days, especially like, Fight TV is a streaming channel, regular channel, etc. Like that. That's what I mean as far as casual in reference to today. Like we've talked about it before, where I don't have the time to watch NXT UK. I don't have time to watch the B and,
Some very interesting points made by my friend Big Daryl. So what do you think? Is the NWA back? Or did the NWA never leave? Do you think of the NWA as a sanctioning body for wrestling? Or do you think of it as a singular wrestling promotion? Get a hold of us on any social media at the Alliance blog and let us know. Let us know what you think. So for Daryl, I'm J. Cal, and you've been riding wild on the road wild. Anyways, we'll see you guys at the matches.